Today I am fishing a lake that's only about 45 minutes from my house in Ohio, but I've only been here 2 times in my life and it was over 10 years ago. I'm giving myself 7 hours to catch 5 bass that weigh 12 pounds. Let's go. Well, I failed miserably. As a matter of fact, over 7 hours trying to hit 12 pounds, I only ended up catching 2 bass the entire day. And I lost actually 3 other fish, and I'm gonna talk about that in just a minute, but I decided to make this video instead of a lake break video like I normally do, kind of into a teaching video, because looking back on the day, I felt like there was 3 big things that I did wrong that really kind of led to the day that I have. And I'm hoping that my failure can help you when you go fishing. So let's go ahead and jump on in. This video is brought to you by Omnia Tackle. I truly believe that Omnia is not only a place to go and get your tackle, but it is just an absolute resource for us as fishermen. One of my favorite resources that Omnia has is simply fishing reports. When I go to a new body of water, something that I love to do is simply look at fishing reports, see what is happening on the lake and what has happened for different anglers. Sometimes spending 3 or 4 minutes looking at fishing reports before you go to the lake can really help you kind of dial in things a lot quicker. It's something that I didn't do while fishing on this particular day. Omnia also has a pro app, which not only gives you high quality topographical maps for over 44,000 lakes across America, but it also allows you to put different layers on those topographical maps. You can really see which way the wind is blowing. You can see where there's clear, where there's muddy water. You can see where there's warm water and cool water. These are all things that really help you to clue in the fish a lot faster. I'm gonna leave some links down below in the description. One of the best ways to help support this channel is shopping at Omnia and exploring all their resources. I want you guys to know that I honestly thought about not posting this video because I didn't catch them. But honestly, I just felt like that would be wrong. The reality of bass fishing is that there are a lot of days where we go out there and it just doesn't come together. We don't go out there and catch them. But I think that those days are some of the days where we learn the most. And so that's why I decided to post this video. Again, so that hopefully it helps you in some way. So let's go ahead and jump into the mistakes. Now, mistake number 1 that I made on this day was fishing too fast. On this channel, I have always preached a lot about covering water, and that is something that I'm always going to stand behind. I think often, more times than not, if you can cover a lot of water, you are simply going to see a lot more options that the lake has to provide. You look at some of the best anglers out there on the planet, guys like Kevin Van Dam, Jacob Wheeler, Dustin Connell. These guys fish extremely fast and they can cover a lot of water, therefore seeing a lot more than your typical angler and also being able to process more information, helping you to catch more bass. But there are days out there on the water, days like today, I'm gonna tell you why, that you can fish too fast and you can fish overfish. Now, what I mean by overfish is that you can fish through an area that actually has a lot of bass, but you are throwing something that is too fast. You are fishing through it too quick, and you will fish right through an area that has a lot of fish without even really knowing it. Now, a big mistake that I made on this day is I fished through a few of these areas and I knew that a couple of these areas had fish, but yet I just continued to keep going, because to me, a lot of times the grass is always greener. With the water being around 62, 63 degrees on this day, I knew that there would probably be bass shallow and wanting to spawn. So I started off the day by hitting a few of these small pockets. Now, one of the first pockets that I came to, I was fishing a swim jig. A bass came up there and cracked that thing, and that ended up being my first keeper of the day within the first 40 minutes of me fishing. Not only did I catch that fish, but shortly thereafter, I had another fish come up and swipe that thing, but I missed him. So I kind of figured that I might have another hour or so of the morning where the fish were going to hit this swim jig. So I decided to just start hitting as many of these small pockets as I could. Now, over that next hour, I hit a number of small pockets, but the one thing that I ended up running into is a lot of fish swiping at that swim jig and missing it, as well as just following it. There was actually 3 different pockets that I fished through that I saw a number of different fish in. Even later in the day, after I had tried a number of different things, I was still kind of picking up that swim jig when I was in shallow water, and I actually ended up hooking into a really solid fish, a 3+ pounder, and losing it. And then I had a couple of other fish again come up and swipe at that thing and completely miss it.
No! You gotta be kidding me, dude.
The biggest thing that I should have realized on this day was that a lot of these fish that were swiping at it, following it, barely getting hooked by that bait and losing it, were all fish that were actually spawning. A lot of these fish were actually on beds. And I really feel like if I had taken the time to actually flip and pitch maybe a Texas rig and or just fish a wacky rig really slow through a lot of those areas where I had seen fish, I probably would have caught a lot of these fish that were missing my swim jig. Now, the crazy thing about this is I saw this exact same scenario take place a number of years ago down on Lake Toho in Florida, but this time I was on the right side of things. There was actually a big tournament that I fished, the Bassmaster Open. I had ran down to Kissimmee Lake, actually on the Toho chain, and I was fishing in an area, and there was a guy that wasn't fishing in front of me. But what I noticed about this guy is that he was fishing a horny toad and a swimming worm a lot. He was fishing through this area with a bunch of lily pads extremely quick. Now, what I did was I decided to flip and pitch a worm very slowly into openings in the pads. And I actually ended up catching a lot of fish, a ton of fish behind this guy because he was fishing too fast and I was clued in that these fish were more or less on beds. That is the exact same thing that I should have done while fishing on this body of water on this day, but I didn't. I fished too fast and it burned me. Now, mistake number 2 when it came to this day of fishing was spreading myself too thin. To me, this is a little bit more of an advanced tip when it comes to bass fishing. This is something that I have learned over a number of years by fishing a lot of big tournaments on multiple day events. But this will apply to you even if you just go fishing, fun fishing for one random day. And the thing that happens a lot is that if you are a fairly versatile angler, there are days where you can actually spread yourself too thin out there on the water. And what I mean by that is that if you can do a little bit of everything, sometimes you try to do a little bit of everything, and therefore you don't put enough time behind something that actually may be working. For example, on this day of fishing, I was fishing both shallow and deep a lot. I was fishing off the bank and I was fishing on the bank. And the thing about it was the second fish that I caught this day, which actually ended up being a decent one, close to 3 pounds, I caught it on an offshore piece of wood. I had taken the time to do a little bit of idling. I found some brush piles. I found some random logs. And like the 3rd or 4th one that I came to, I caught this one particular fish. Now, while that was a great thing because, hey, I caught a good fish, it also now made me want to fish more off the bank. And so I started splitting my time up throughout the day by fishing off the bank, idling around, and also fishing on the bank with that swim jig. Now, the thing about that is when you are going back and forth in between something, you never really fully grasp what that particular fish, whether that's the shallow fish or the deep fish, is actually doing. For example, I really feel like if I had stayed shallow the entire day of fishing, I would have either run into that one particular area where the fish were biting really well, or I would have finally just slowed down and realized, hey, a lot of these fish are up on beds. If I slow down with the wacky rig, if I slow down with a Texas rig, I might be able to start picking these fish off. Now, on the flip side of things, I also think that if I had spent the entire day fishing off the bank and graphing more offshore grass, offshore wood, offshore rock, I would have found that 1 or 2 areas that held a lot of fish where I could have gotten kind of rich in a hurry, where I could have caught a lot of bass in a hurry. And by flip-flopping back and forth between shallow and deep and trying different techniques in both areas, I was simply spreading myself too thin. I wasn't fully grasping what the fish were doing. And like I said, I think this is more of a mental thing when it comes to bass fishing, but this is something that can happen to a lot of us anglers when we go out there for any given day. I know for me, some of the best days that I have ever had out there on the water was when I kind of knew what the fish should be doing and I just stuck with it until I found that one area. Whether that was, hey, I'm gonna stick shallow and throw a spinnerbait until I find that one pocket, or hey, I'm gonna go offshore, I'm gonna wait until I find that one ledge or that one offshore rock pile that holds a lot of fish. So when it comes to your fishing day, try not to spread yourself too thin. Now, the third mistake that I made on this day was not using my resources. To me, this is actually a really, really big one. Anytime that I usually do a lake break video, some of the ones that you guys like the best, I will usually spend about an hour or so the night before kind of looking over a topographical map. And I will spend time looking at fishing reports like I talked about in the ad of this video. And I will just spend some time on the internet kind of just looking up the lake and trying to figure out how I should go about fishing, trying to figure out how the lake lays out. Something that I also like to do is simply look at the weather and what the weather has been doing in that general area that I am fishing. I really think that it helps me when I go out there fishing. Now, what I didn't do on this day was I didn't do any of that. And the biggest reason is because this particular lake that I fished on this day was only about 45 minutes from my house. I have probably fished it maybe once in the last 12 years. So I don't fish it a lot, and the reason being is because it is a idle only lake. You can't really run your big motor fast, but you can idle. So I just don't fish it a whole lot. But with that being said, I see random tournaments that go out of there, and I hear people talk about it from time to time. So I kind of knew a little bit about this lake just from like over the years of hearing things, but I didn't do any research. And one of the biggest ways that this burned me out there on the water was that when I actually put in the water on this particular day, the water was pretty stained. It was pretty off color. And honestly, I thought that that was just the way that this particular part of the lake always looked like. And the reason being was because the very last time I was there, like 12 years ago or whatever it was, the lake was fairly off color in this exact same area. So I thought that it was always this way. And I spent about an hour and a half fishing in pretty muddy water that day, throwing a spinnerbait. And the thing was this was actually pretty fresh mud. The lake typically isn't this off color in this particular area. Sometimes it can be a little bit off color, but it's not as muddy as it was on this particular day. I'm not saying that muddy water isn't productive, but freshly muddy water, water that has a lot of sediment in it, you tend to not have bass that are in the biting mode until a couple of days, even a week after that kind of settles a little bit. And that is definitely something that I probably would have figured out if I just spent some time on my phone or on my laptop before I even got to the lake. To me, I truly believe that there is a multiplier effect when you spend a little time off the water before you get to that body of water that you are fishing. Now, I don't know exactly what the multiplier is, and I think it probably is different for every single lake. But what I mean by multiplier is that I think for every minute that you spend kind of doing a little research and examining maps and looking at the weather before you get to the lake will save you probably 4, 5, 6 minutes out there on the water. While that may not sound like a whole lot, it adds up to a ton. For example, if I had spent an hour the night before looking at a topographical map, circling some areas on a topographical map that look good, maybe looking at Google Earth and examining kind of what areas of the lake maybe were a little bit clearer, looking at my Omnia app, looking at, fishing reports that had happened recently, looking at all those different things. I think if I'd spent an hour doing that the night before, it would probably save me 4 hours of fishing time out on the water the day after. And so that to me is the multiplier effect. Is it always 1 to 4 or 1 to 5? No. I mean, it might be just half the time. But regardless, that time that you spend off the water can truly help you on the water. Now, if you guys want to watch my most recent lake break video, I'm going to leave it linked right up here. These are more of the traditional videos that I like to do. And if you guys want to help support the channel, click on Omnia. That link is right here. I will see you guys in the next one.